Chapter 36, Fruit of Venom. The four of them ran from the creature and hid huddling together in a nearby recess, trying not to make any noise as whatever that thing was that was snuffling and grunting moved away. It sounded awful, like some kind of hideous monster. Evie shivered, hoping it would move away without discovering them. She knew she was first up against her talisman and wanted to get it over with as soon as she could. "What is it?" Carlos whispered, shaking. Mal stuck her head out of the hollow to see if she could see it. It's big and pink, like a huge cat or a tiger. I can't tell." "A huge pink tiger. Great. We're scared we're going to get eaten by a creature that looks like a puff of cotton candy," said Jay. The snuffling and grunting sound faded. Evie exhaled. "Okay, let's figure out a way to get across the lake." Carlos and Jay tried to tie the branches together to make some kind of raft, but it was clear that wasn't going to work, as they didn't have anything they could use for twine. Jay kicked at the sad pile of branches dejectedly. "Let's see how far it is. Maybe there's some other way," said Evie. They entered the larger cavern, which was as big as a professional tourney stadium. Stalactites arced on the ceiling above them, like stars in a black sky. They stared once more at the toxic tree that stood in the middle of a tiny island surrounded by water. An island within an island and underwater, too. Sid is right, and magic down here is wild, said Jay. Evie stood at the edge of the water, and a smooth rock just large and flat enough to step on appeared. She looked at her friends, who shrugged. She held her breath and jumped on it. Another rock appeared in front of her. Stepping stones. Evie looked over her shoulder and smiled. "Come on, it's like it knows I'm here." The talisman's desire to be found, Sid had told them. Evie led the way, and the rest followed, careful to make sure they didn't fall into the poisoned water. "Almost there," said Evie as they stepped closer to the tiny islet holding a single toxic tree. From afar, the tree's knotted bark resembled a pattern of scowling faces. "Creepy," said Carlos. "I know," said Mal. "We get to hang out in the coolest places." "Make sure your feet don't touch the water," warned Evie, who knew a lot about poison, at least when it came to apples. She knew what they looked like, how they smelled, which ones would put you to sleep, and which ones would kill you on the spot. "We'd melt like sugar cubes in a hot cup of tea if you tried to swim in here." "Nice image," said Jay. "I don't think we'd be as tasty, though." "We're here," cried Evie, stepping ashore. She turned around and helped the rest of them onto the island. "Great, start picking apples," said Mal. "Why is it called the Dark Forest?" said Jay, looking at the map that Carlos was holding open, when it only holds one tree. "Well, it is dark," said Mal. "There's that." The only light came from Jay's flashlight. Sid said the maps weren't completely accurate. They were just guesses, Carlos reminded them. From afar, the tree looked small, but up close, it was taller than a building, its trunk as large as a house. It almost took up the entire island. "I guess I'll have to climb it?" said Evie, staring nervously at the forbidding tree. Evie spent her days indoors learning how to be pretty. She wasn't really one to climb trees. The light from the flashlight flickered, growing dimmer by the minute, its batteries fading. "Hurry before our light runs out. We've still got 3 more talismans to recover," said Jay. "And whatever's out there is still out there," said Carlos. In the distance, the sound of faint snuffling echoed in the cave. "Hurry before it finds us." "All right, I'm going up," said Evie, shaking slightly as she began to climb the tree trunk. She pulled herself up on the nearest branch and started the long, slow climb to the top, where the fruit was. Twice the thorns pricked her, but she ignored the little nicks on her legs and arms. She had work to do, and she could always get rid of them with concealer later. Down below, her friends waited anxiously, calling up advice. "Watch that branch! Go the other way! Get a toe hold on the left and lift yourself up." When she finally reached the top of the tree, she was stumped. There were hundreds of apples, all of them poisoned, she knew, but there was only one talisman, only one fruit of venom. Which could it be? There are a lot of apples up here, she called down. I don't know which one to pick. They all look alike. You'll know which one, called Carlos. Focus, Evie told herself. Her friends were doing their best to help out, and they had to get out of here soon before that snuffling monster returned. Concentrate on the apples. There were so many of them, and they were all so red and juicy. Which one, she wondered aloud, and then she saw it through the highest branches. One golden apple among all of the red ones. She clambered up and plucked it from its branch. It was gorgeous, shiny, and perfect. Evie was mesmerized by its beauty. It looked absolutely delicious, and it was practically asked to be eaten. What could it hurt? What if she just took one tiny... What are you doing? Jay yelled from below. Too late. Evie had already taken a bite of the apple. It was delicious, and for a moment she didn't regret it. Then her eyelids drooped as she yawned. Evie, what's happening? Asked Mal. I feel sleepy. Like the dwarf, Evie laughed as she sat on the branch she'd been standing on, her head beginning to fog from the poison. Don't! Stay awake! Cried Mal. I'll try, said Evie. She stood back up, fighting against the urge to sleep. She'd accidentally gobbled a poisoned apple once or twice when she was a kid, so maybe she had some kind of resistance to them. Her mother was always leaving them everywhere. I should have known better, she grumbled, already growing weaker and trying to fight off the sleep that was threatening to overwhelm her. I'm just going to take a little nap, okay? She called down. No, Mal cried. No naps, no resting. Just keep moving. Moving, said Evie. Got to keep moving. She struggled to keep her eyes open, scrunching her face into odd contortions, holding one lid open with a finger. But it fluttered shut. Evie's knees were wobbling, and all she could think of was how nice it would be to lay down her head and take a brief... No! Evie cried again, or maybe it was the third time. Evie hadn't realized that she had sat down once more. I'm in trouble, she thought. Big trouble. Get up, Carlos. Jay was getting ready to climb the tree himself, but when he placed his hands on the bark, a force pushed him away, and he flew to the ground. Only Evie could climb the tree. This was her talisman. It says here that only by mastering the fruit of venom you could counter its poison, said Carlos, reading from the map. Evie, don't give in. Save yourself. Save myself. But from what? Evie thought, before everything went black and the poison overcame her. When she opened her eyes, she was standing in a room not unlike her mother's bedroom, on a podium in front of a magic mirror. Where am I? She asked. Where are my friends? She was alone. Then she realized she was alone because they had abandoned her, and she had no friends. Every insecure, jealous, and poisonous thought filled her mind. She was standing before the legendary magic mirror, and it looked like it had before it was destroyed, whole and full of evil counsel. What's this? Asked Evie. She stared at the mirror. It showed her Mal and Maddie laughing at her, pointing and screeching and mocking. Mal was never my friend, thought Evie. She was only pretending. The minute Mal returned to the island, she forgot about Evie. The mirror showed another image, Mal, Jay, and Carlos leaving her alone at the poison lake. They had left the minute she'd climbed the tree. They were laughing at her, and they were going to leave her to that awful grunting creature. She was alone, and she would always be alone. Mal's mother had exiled her and her mother to the castle across the way. Evie had grown up with only spiderwebs for company. She never had friends until the three of them, but maybe she never had friends at all. Maybe it was all a lie. No one liked her. Everyone was only pretending, but now that she knew the truth, she would destroy them all. She would make them hurt. She would make sure they never laughed like that again. She would show them what it meant to be alone and abandoned and friendless. Friendless? Yen Sid's words echoed in her mind. Evie, remember that when you believe you are alone in the world, you are far from friendless. Yen Sid had told her the total opposite of the poisonous thoughts that now filled her brain. She stared at the mirror and the image of her friends deserting her. It wasn't true. It couldn't be true. Maddie had betrayed Mal, but Mal had never betrayed Evie. Carlos and Jay were like her brothers. The three of them would always be there for her. You're wrong, she cried to the mirror. My friends are here. They're waiting down there, waiting for me. She stepped away from the mirror, holding the apple in her hand. I'm not alone. I am far from friendless. I am surrounded by my friends, and I will return to them. The mirror shattered, and Evie screamed. Suddenly, she was on the ground, looking up at the faces of her friends. What happened? She asked. You fell, said Carlos, all the way down, and we couldn't wake you. We thought you were going to go to sleep forever, or at least until you could get Doug to come and wake you up with True Love's kiss. Mal smirked. You okay? Said Jay, helping her up. Evie nodded, rubbing the deep from her eyes and tossing back her hair. I'm awake at least, she announced with considerable flair. Did you get it? Asked Mal. The talisman? In answer, Evie showed them the golden apple, which was whole once more, but no longer shining. It totally messed with my head, but I purged the poison from my body and mastered the talisman. Yen Sid was right. We've got to be careful with these things. They're tricky. What did it do? Asked Mal, curious. Evie shook her head and placed the apple in her handbag. Let's just say I knew you guys wouldn't leave me here alone. Mal rolled her eyes. Well, one more minute, and we might have, she joked. But then who's going to make my Oridon prep prom dress? Hey, guys, Jay interrupted. Look at this. He and Carlos were standing in front of a doorway carved into a tree trunk. That wasn't here before, said Carlos. And look, the lake is draining, said Evie. The tiny islet began to shake. Now that Evie has the fruit of venom, this place is self-destructing, said Mal. Do we open it? Said Jay. I don't think we have a choice, said Mal, looking around as the ground rumbled beneath them. It felt like the whole island was about to crumble. Let's go. That thing is heading over here, said Carlos, scanning anxiously for any sign of the snuffling beast. Open it, yelled Mal. Jay threw open the door, and a blazing light shone from the darkness. It looks like a desert in here, he told them, stepping inside. Evie and Carlos followed behind. Mal waited by the entrance, her eyes on the lake, or what was left of it, ready to defend her friends from the mysterious creature in the tunnels. But the monster never appeared, and so Mal followed her friends through the door in the tree.